Yeah, I might need to open my can of Diet Coke and chug it at this point.
The Signal. You are listening to The Signal.
The Signal.
Cutting through the noise.
You are listening to The Signal.
Welcome back to The Signal, a podcast with a global perspective on media, journalism, and technology. I'm Tom Trewinnard.
And I'm Fergus Bell.
This week, we are going to be talking about the International Journalism Festival in Perugia. You were there. I wasn't. We've not caught up since.
Yeah.
So we've tried to keep this conversation fresh for you all. I was very sad not to be there and felt like I was missing a lot. Firstly, the weather was good, which is not always the case in Perugia. But I want you to tell me about what I missed.
Well, let's tell our listeners and viewers what this is. It's a festival that's in a beautiful hilltop town, medieval town in the middle of Italy. It's kind of like the Cannes of journalism. It's where the great and the good flock every year to a beautiful setting to talk about all of journalism, all of news media, now creators and AI, and it's something that's in everyone's calendar. It's something that we all look forward to. We're all excited about, and a lot of decisions and a lot of new stuff gets unveiled there. It's great. It's the highlight.
It's a really important moment for kind of taking the pulse of the industry. Last year, for example, the festival came sort of hot on the heels of the Donald Trump smashing USAID's budget, which played out in a pretty devastating way to a lot of media in the developing world. The mood was a bit glum last year.
It was a bit glum. It was a bit somber.
How was this year?
It was upbeat. It was optimistic. I wanted to sense check that it wasn't just me. I've read up on what a few people have said, and that seems to actually be what other people felt as well. Like good vibes. It helps that it was the sunshine was out, but people were generally optimistic. It felt like they had taken on board everything that happened last year and actually realized that significant change is coming, but sticking your head in the sand is not the way to deal with it. There were people who still stick their head in the sand. There will always be people who do that and ignore things, and that's fine. But I think that festival has traditionally been a place where people look forward, and it very much felt like that. I'm not sure that everyone has the answers, but as to what. But I think that they knew that there could be answers.
Yeah, we go back and forth, I think, sometimes on how optimistic we're feeling. We try and stay optimistic, and we think that there's lots of exciting work to be done. What are the causes for optimism this year? Maybe I can lay out the case for not optimism.
Sure. Start us on the low point.
Newsrooms laying off lots of people, business models kind of crumbling, trust declining, AI eating the world. That's the kind of pessimist case for 2026. What's the optimist case?
Optimist case is that there are new business models that are working, that people can see. There are new things being created that others can replicate that seem to be tied into business models, new ways of distributing, new ways of building products. I think costs are going down in terms of how much it costs to build something new for journalism, a journalism product. That means that actually everyone's got their hands on new things and they're experimenting. I would say almost everyone there has done some kind of prototyping this year. Then there's the element of there were several themes and some things that weren't there, like climate change, journalism,
not on the agenda.
That was not present. There were some side events, but that wasn't there. That's a little concerning. especially for us because we work with climate journalism as well. But it felt like everyone there had been creating things, and then there were also conversations about creators,
Mm.
and
Optimistic
optimistic
conversations
conversations about creators, because there have been conversations there about kind of like how do we make our own creators, but actually here there were examples of news creators that had appeared organically, or that actually maybe giving distribution over to
Interesting.
creators isn't the most terrible thing in the world.
Interesting. It seemed like there were some creators in Perugia. I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
finding on Instagram some really interesting people talking many languages, interviewing people, grabbing them on the street.
Yeah.
That's something we should try for next year.
It was maybe the creator festival. I do think that there is something around this kind of tone of the industry. I did a quick Gemini sentiment analysis on the titles of the sessions, because I always wonder, like, how doomed is journalism this year, or what's the role of declining journalism when audiences are also declining. Like, there's a lot of things are phrased negatively when people pitch sessions because they're attention grabbing. They are genuinely the thing that we need to talk about, but I feel like they're quite doom and gloomy. I think it was about 50% was positive, 50% negative.
That's very good.
Very roughly.
That's very good.
So would need to go back and look at what other years were, but I'm more positive than negative.
Was there much hand-wringing about the question of, and I'm thinking specifically around creators, the question of what is a journalist? Was that? And I'm sort of recalling our days of in the early years of citizen journalism.
Yeah, there was some of that. I definitely had some conversations where someone was saying, but what is a journalist anyway? And I said, well, yeah, but we had the same conversation when it was citizen journalists. When people first got smartphones, they were reading, they were creating newsworthy content that people would read, that people would view. And, well, they're not journalists because they've not had journalistic training. I just am going to resist all efforts to open the debate about what is a journalist. I think the journalists are those with stories to tell that are getting it out there, and that is going to look like it's going to have many different formats. Like, if we're talking about like liquid journalism or liquid content, let's talk about liquid storytellers or liquid journalists, because I think that's what we have to see. It's the right person delivering that news and information and content to the right audience at the right time. I think it's 2026. We don't do labels in 2026.
I like that. For those of you who have not been to Perugia, the way the festival works is lots of people gather. There's many, many sessions, probably, I think maybe 10 sessions happening at the same time on a whole range of topics. People pitch to speak at sessions. Fergus has spoken there many times. I've spoken there slightly fewer times, as he's always reminding me. But what was there any session that you found particularly enlightening, challenging, inspiring?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, there was. And I was messaging you throughout saying, oh my goodness, go back and look at this. All of the sessions at this festival are streamed live, and we'll share the link so that people can look back at those. I was in one that was focused on creators, but it was showcasing creators. So it was moderated by the director of the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, Mitali Mukherjee. And she had 3 news creators. And by news creators, like, these were people that were journalists or come from journalism mainly, and were entirely focused on news. They didn't kind of fall into it. There's a whole category of great creators who have created a news presence without necessarily realizing they've fallen into it, and we will talk about those because and hopefully speak to some. But these were people who were committed to creating news content in a non-traditional way. So, and the thing that let me talk about a couple of them. I wanted to make sure I got their names. Nicholas Capano, who is the founder and director of Turno in Chile, and Emilio Domenech, who's in Spain, and he is the founder and editor of What If. Now, these are live streamed news podcast shows where they have built a studio. And Nicholas actually went to look at the CNN breaking news studio in Atlanta.
Wow.
Saw how one person could manage a kind of breaking news studio operation, flew back to Chile and created it himself using video game graphics, and he has these screens behind him, and then started broadcasting news. And they now
when you say broadcasting, where are they? Where is this going?
This is streaming in Chile, and it's competing directly with broadcasters now.
On YouTube?
I think it's on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay.
On YouTube. And I think on other platforms. They definitely fluctuate between the platforms depending on what parts of that show. But it's some of them are 5 hours. Emilio at What If, I think it's 2 hours. But
5 hours.
5 hours of broadcast.
Wow.
And
that's stamina.
It's stamina, but live streaming is the thing that gives their content trust. So it can't be edited. It's produced as a live stream. It's recorded as a live stream. It's advertised that it's recorded as a live stream. People don't watch it live necessarily, but they may watch it back and they may see the live comments that were happening in real time. But it's so important that it's live. And I don't think that's what the news industry is doing. News channels have gone away. But here you go. Here you have new startups directly competing with TV by going live. And one of the things that they do is it's intentionally got this format so that if a young person is looking at this on their tablet or phone, their parents can kind of recognize what they're watching, that they can, because it's got a ticker.
It's newsy.
It looks like news. Yeah. It gives that credibility. And I think that's how they're getting new audiences as well. So rather than ripping up the rule book, they are replicating the rule book. And we talked about innovation before. The innovation in this case is going back to the basics, is trying a tested format and using it.
In a new way, in a new moment. And it's interesting that resonates with younger audiences because we've spent, the last few Perugias have been, how do we engage young audiences around news? Well, maybe we just...
Well, there's literally the playbook now for how to engage young audiences, and it's working, and they're competing, and they're growing.
How do they make money?
YouTube ads is how they make money.
So that means they're reaching a really significant number of people.
They're reaching a significant amount of people. YouTube ads is how they make money, and they are also packaging up their clips almost instantly. So they're distributing it on multiple platforms. One of them said that basically YouTube is like the new CMS for them. So they look at all of these tools and they are using them in a way that builds a business, makes business sense, is their way of creating and distributing content, and they are using multiple platforms. So it's not just a one platform policy. Emilio was using, he was explaining how he will be talking like we are now, asks a question, as soon as he's off mic, he's writing to the team, clip that up.
The power of the clip.
The power of the clip.
Yeah. Can we move on to the next sort of creator clip streaming bit of the show?
Yeah, I might need to open my can of Diet Coke and chug it at this point.
We've seen recently that OpenAI has done something quite unexpected and acquired a media channel, a media brand called TBPN. TBPN, similarly to what you're describing, is a daily live 2 to 3 hour long show
Yeah.
in a pretty well constructed studio, all about AI. They get a lot of tech founders on there. There's some things that I was struggling to wrap my head around until I thought about a bit more deeply. It's not been disclosed how much this acquisition was,
No.
but it's been rumored in the low hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So big numbers. When you look at the YouTube channel of TBPN on the videos, they have relatively low numbers in the thousands of views. And so I was very confused about this. But when you look at the clips go absolutely gangbusters. The sort of like moments that are being clipped are extremely well viewed and extremely lucrative. And it seems like maybe that's the thing more than the long show itself that OpenAI is most interested in.
So scripting for clipping is going to be the new currency for...
We might have to learn some lessons on that.
Okay. we should definitely learn some lessons.
Have you watched any
I've
of
watched some of
TBPN?
it. I've seen them. They wear, the two guys who run it, John Coogan and Geordie Hayes, they wear mostly white suits
Yeah.
and they chug cans of Diet Coke as they're
And yerba mate,
talking. Yeah. And it's fast paced and it's like kind of like sports broadcasting / news.
Heavy on the ticker
broadcasting.
tapes. The
Yeah.
visuals are quite out there. I'd say it's quite a difficult watch. I am somebody interested in AI and deals and technology. Yeah. I'm not going to be a subscriber.
I asked AI for a kind of summary of it, and it says that it's got a Miami Vice aesthetic, which I think is actually quite true. Positions them as self-aware, high-octane alternatives to stuffy legacy media. But the irony is, they've got a 20-person team, a studio, a ticker tape.
And they've grown that in a year, I think.
Yeah. And it's a very traditional broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah. There's they have the currency is that they're able to get big name guests. So I think Zuckerberg's been on there. I think Altman's been on there.
Yeah.
They
liked it so much he bought it. Yeah.
They have an audience that is the kind of movers and shakers in the industry. They know that audience very well. They're able to speak with them in a way like, I am not their audience. That's fine. They're doing something different. And yeah, tremendously successful in a way.
We got onto them because we got onto them talking about them today. We started talking about them today because of the session I saw at the International Journalism Festival, where actually news producers were creating something like this, or people becoming news producers to create something like this. If you were to turn around and say, create a live streaming, like 24-hour news channel or like multi-hour streaming broadcast of news content for digital audiences right now, I think people were so burned from from that decline. Are they ready to bring it back again?
Yeah, I don't know. People talk about the pivot to video is kind of referenced in conversations as a moment where journalists and newsrooms, media institutions bought into the hype of big tech and got burned.
Yeah,
which is true. But the pivot to, we did need to pivot to video. We do need to pivot to video.
Yeah.
I think we have pivoted to
We're
video.
pivoting to video right now.
But the memory of being burned is still...
Yeah. But it's cheaper now. And I think when people talk about the rise of video podcasts, it's, for a lot of people, it is just replicating the TV format without having to be in a huge studio. I mean, the setup like this works so well. It's high quality. The sound is crisp. It can be engaging. Hopefully, this show may definitely others. Actually, the barrier, the cost to entry is not high. Perhaps what we're going to be led by the market. The creators that the industry is quite scared of are going down this route because they are seeing that it can be profitable and making money and sustainable. How do journalists get in on this now? I think, again, we talk about innovation all the time. We've discussed what innovation meant. What's the innovation that can happen right now for the news industry to not let live streaming be completely taken away from them? And I mean, maybe it should be taken away from them, but how do they get in on that now if they want to?
I think it's difficult because there's a big piece of the challenge here is around, you've identified, and you saw in Perugia, 2 journalists who have just gone and done it.
Yeah.
And so the tension between institutions and the talent going and just doing it, we've seen it with Substack, we've seen it with Instagram creators, YouTube creators. People can just do it. And so there's starts to be this question of, if I, as an individual journalist, can launch my own thing with minimal costs, I can monetize it without in a much more sort of financially lucrative way than being paid to be a journalist, which is not the most lucrative career. So so there's a tension there. People can do it. People are doing it. How do the newsrooms sort of playing catch up, I suppose?
I think they first have to understand it. I think they have to understand exactly what it is that people have done. It's not, you don't just carbon copy it by setting up a studio and do it. You have to you have to be scripting for clipping. You have to be thinking about the talent. The organizations that were in this panel that I saw in Italy that were talking, they weren't just talking about the broadcast. They were talking about the way that they recruit, the talent they recruit. I think they called it the cult of smiling that they introduced, because they wanted it to be a happy place to work, because happy people working in a happy newsroom created good, engaging content. And I think that is part of understanding why this is an opportunity. We didn't know very much about creators. We didn't know very much about podcasts.
We're learning fast.
But one of the reasons we're doing this is because we want to be able to talk about it. Like, we want to talk about the whole process and understand the implication for the industry and how we can support creators.
Totally.
So in order to know that, we have to understand it. We have to know the economics. We have to understand the technology. And I think if there is a real opportunity here for news organizations to adopt this streaming, especially those who talk about needing to regain trust. And these creators who are streaming say that live streaming element is the thing that has definitely created trust in their product. So there's just so many opportunities here. It seems like it would be a wasted opportunity if no one else jumped on it now. And there can be healthy competition. There should be.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about how would a big news brand who, is set up for serious TV news, would it be a sub brand? Like how do they sort of translate themselves for this context where it's clearly something very different that the audience is looking for? I think one thing that we've seen that does not work is if you many newsrooms have sort of tried to do this kind of like the lesson they've learned from creators is that you need to do a vertical video, and they've sort of like aped the format without really understanding why that's successful.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that it's a vertical video. It's about the connection with the person talking about it and how they're talking about it. So I'm just curious how the sort of practicalities of doing that work. Sort of how do you stay true to your sort of institutional brand while trying something new in a different way, in a real way that is connecting with audiences?
Well, you don't start with 5-hour live broadcast. You start with maybe, what does a 20-minute broadcast look like? I think you launch and you're not afraid to change what you've launched later on. I think it's not kind of like one and done. It's a process of iteration, and I think that's what the audience also appreciate, because you're able to respond to them, and it has to be interactive. You said you could be, it had to be professional. It can still be professional, but dynamic and exciting, and I would love to see more of this.
That's it for this show. We're out of time. There's lots more to talk about here, and we will be back every week. Thank you for listening to The Signal. Do subscribe to get our show notes, where we're going to share lots more information and links to some of the things that we've been talking about. We'll see you next time. I've been Tom Trewinnard.
And I'm Fergus Bell. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Signal. For more information on who we are and what we do, as well as what we're thinking about and who we're talking to, subscribe to our newsletter and find us on YouTube. All the details are in the show notes. We do want to hear from you, so please leave us a comment and share your thoughts and suggestions on The Signal on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.